Firstly, I want to begin the story by saying that I do think Egypt is a lovely country. It's populated by many wonderful people, and I have friends that are both immigrants and natives. I have visited the country again since the incident I'm going to tell you about, and I enjoyed my time there. Unfortunately, though, there's no avoiding the fact that attitudes to women in Egypt can be unpleasant. Things are a bit more relaxed in the country in 2025, but when this occurred in 2011, it could be extremely risky for a woman to walk around by herself, especially uncovered. A lot of Egyptian women wear hijabs or niqabs, covering their hair or almost everything apart from their eyes. Of course, Western non-Muslim women visiting Egypt just dress how they normally would, but this can be dangerous and downright stupid if you're alone. And as such, when I first visited Cairo, it was strongly advised that young women cover up as much as possible, make sure that they're with a male chaperone, and stick to the touristy areas. I was most excited about seeing the pyramids and exploring the deserts, and I wasn't even particularly thrilled about spending a few nights in central Cairo before we began our proper tour. Our tour guides insisted that it was totally worth it though, and we needed to experience the city to experience Egypt. As I followed the tour group through the bazaars, taking in the sights, the sounds, and the smells, I was starting to get won over. My dad was engaged in animated discussion with one of the guides, and they become fast friends. Mom just seemed happy to look at the rugs and ornaments for sale, and all the other middle-aged tourists were cooing and awing over the sights. I was the only young woman in her early 20s, and there was a guy my age on the tour group too, but he'd opted out of this afternoon's city tour due to food poisoning, which was really because he was hungover from the night before. Nobody was really paying attention to me, nor did I to them, which is why I didn't notice at first when I lost sight of the tour group. At first I didn't panic. They couldn't have gone far. But when I turned down the next alleyway and found myself in a crowd of unfamiliar Egyptian faces, it did cause me to pause. A few of the older male store owners were looking at me a little strangely, their eyes traveling up and down my body, even though I was wearing jeans and a long-sleeved t-shirt, the best compromise I could make in this heat. I got pulled along by the throng of the crowd, and before I knew it, I'd been kind of forced into another side of the alley, ducking out of the flow of people just so I could get my bearings. A few young men stood in a doorway, and I knew immediately that they were trouble. They sort of strutted over towards me in the way that certain guys do, and the way they studied my body made the previous store owners look reserved. They looked at me with a barely disguised hunger, and I swear to God, one of them even licked his lips. They started talking to each other in Arabic, and I couldn't understand what most of them had said, but recognized the word for cattle or cow and girl. One of them said something that caused the others to hoot and clap his buddy on the shoulders. I quickly apologized for disturbing them, which was a mistake. I shouldn't have acknowledged them or made eye contact. Before I could step back out of the alley, one of them grabbed me by the wrist and pulled me deeper into the shadows. My blood immediately ran cold. I knew exactly what they wanted to do to me and what the things that they were saying meant. One of them pinned my arms behind my back, while another one started to lift my t-shirt, running his fingers over my stomach. I felt sick and knew that this was it. If I didn't do something now, then this was going to be an event that would define the rest of my life, whether I wanted it to or not. I drew on all my self-defense training and slammed my body back into the guy holding my hands. He hit the wall with a thud, letting go of my wrists. Using the momentum, I kicked forwards at the guy who had been touching me, slamming his head backwards against the first guy's nose as I did so. I heard a crunch and a scream, and quickly pulled free as two of the guys howled in pain. The third guy had been watching, but he was the one that started to chase. I had no idea where I was running to or how I could find safety. There was every chance that I'd just run into more angry young men who were looking to tear me apart. I can't even describe the chase because it was all some blur. All I know is that the man chasing me grabbed my hair and shirt at least a few times, including one where he tore a chunk of the hair out of my scalp, causing me to cry out in pain. It felt like I'd never escaped him. Everywhere I went, crowds were surging forward, and it was only later that I learned that I was on the outskirts of a goddamn armed riot. And I think that's what saved me. Eventually, I burst into a courtyard and saw my parents and the tour group. They all looked frantic and defensive, and I guess that's why our one tour guide who'd befriended my dad was holding a brick. He barely paused as I came sprinting into the courtyard, followed by a guy who was clearly chasing me. The tour guide pulled back his arm and let his brick fly straight and true. I heard it hit my pursuer's head with a loud, hollow clunk, and he just sort of dropped to the floor like a discarded sack of potatoes. The tour guide said it was better that we got out of here because something was clearly going down. So he and the other guide led us down some more side streets and away from what he explained was turning into a full-scale riot. I asked if we should tell the cops about the guys who tried to assault me, and he just sort of laughed. We made it back to the hotel, which was gated and had armed guards. The next day, it was time for the tour group to move on anyway, and we spent the rest of the vacation at a luxury resort near the pyramids, where we lounged by the pool, relaxed, and went on various day trips to ancient historic sites of interest. Now, I love Egypt, and like I say, I've been back there since, but this was the most terrifying experience I've ever had, and one that could have changed my life, all because some people see others as less than human.